good afternoon, and welcome to the May edition of MySoko. MySoko is an initiative of EXP and Silverstone Technologies. Silverstone, our partner, utilizes their PromoFlow proprietary platform to be able to develop mobile-first solutions for clients and their brands. And today we have a big conversation, and that conversation is about millennials. So I'd like to welcome to the webinar my panelists for today. Awesome, and welcome all of you. I think just very quickly, this is my total sample base of 3, and you can believe everything that they say is totally representative of all the millennials in the continent. I'm kidding. But they're going to share with us their point of view around millennials, how they're seeing things within the continent, the things that they're hopeful for, and some of the exciting projects and challenges that they're facing as young people in the continent today. So very quickly, I'll start the introductions with Oresia.
Thank you, Carol. Greetings, everybody. My name is Oresia Nyawade. I am the co-founder of VUCA, which is a digital platforms and services agency featuring Africa's fastest growing audience of brands, businesses, and everyday people. I also wear a second hat, which is I go by Courage Builder and Accountability Master, where I offer accountability coaching to people who are having a hard time getting their goals done. Thank you.
Great. I am Asteli Ngarambe. I'm hailing from Kigali City in Rwanda, and I am a brand builder with over 10 years experience in marketing. I transitioned from the agency world to the corporate, and I have experience working both in West Africa and in Eastern Africa, where I've built brands to customer bases of over 1 million customers. And today I am working with a social enterprise known as Jibu, and I head their marketing department for Rwanda and DRC. So that's about me. Thanks.
All right. So my name is J.R. Kanu. I am saying hi from Lagos, Nigeria. I have been in Lagos going on 6 years now, so moved back after completing my studies. I am the founder of 2 companies that are run out of Lagos. One is Reach Technologies, which is a transaction informatics firm. What that means is that we help people understand their finances, looking deeply at the way they spend to get insights for how they should mobilize their money. And we also use that to help marketers understand the people who are spending money as a market research outfit. And more in the world of market research, leveraging some really fun time that I had learning design thinking, applying it on the continent. I run the Design Institute Lagos, where we help brands really understand their customers and apply the learnings that they're getting from transaction informatics in the world of product design and services. So yeah, all across the board, the data, the soft skills as well. I'm a pendulum.
So thank you very much. Thank you. I think that I wasn't wrong when I say you represent a big chunk of young people in the continent. So I'm going to start a little bit with young people running their own business. So let's talk entrepreneurship. I'll start with maybe JR, since you've kind of talked around running the Design Institute, setting up a research company. Let's talk a little bit about that. What drove you to entrepreneurship?
So I am one of those crazy people who will tell you how when I was 12, I had this, call it a vision. I was sitting in school and I was like, I'm going to have this really cool company and I will be working with my friends. So that vision has stayed with me throughout. And so even when I was going to school in the US, I kept thinking, when do I get to go back home? When I get to go back home? When do I get to go back home? So when I got hired, my first job on the continent, I told them, you have me 18 months and then I'm going to go start a company. So that desire to build a company has been there for a long time. But this strong belief that it is great companies that change the face of a continent. And so if you want to be part of the change you want to see, one of the best ways to do that is to make it happen in a company.
Horacia, what's your story?
My story with entrepreneurship is actually a bit interesting because I believe that I am the first entrepreneur in my family. And so I was around people who were employed all the time, and the word ownership never really came to me. But it was until I had to work in consulting and be an employee. That's when I realized, this is not the space for me. I need to be able to have the freedom to innovate, to make decisions. And that's what naturally drove me into entrepreneurship.
Okay, and Asili, you're in social impact, which is really entrepreneurship. And
Yes.
you've also worked for 2 Silicon Valley startups. Let's talk a little bit about that. What's driving you to social impact? Why do you find this space more exciting than commercial or brand marketing?
I really believe in in helping Africans grow. So that's something that I strongly believe in. So if it's small businesses, I always want to see how I can contribute to help them grow. And then with social enterprise, something that really excites me every day is that what I do directly impacts the lives of these people. So that's something that's meaning and purpose. I guess is a millennial thing. Is something that's very important for me.
It's interesting you talk about that, because I think the last study that we did, and obviously Reach, you were a partner in that study talking about millennials and the whole idea about purpose and meaning, came through as a really strong driver for some of the actions that we're seeing with young people in the continent. So that's very interesting to know. And I want to switch all the way, and let's talk about this digital space. You're all marketers, and every time we talk about millennials, we're being pushed into, well, they're digital first. How do you see that space? I think every single one of you is currently in one form or another driving their business through digital. So do you just want to kind of share your experience a little bit around that? JR, we could hear you.
Okay, I'm muted. So I'm actually going to force, I'm sure they're going to ask me, I mean, they're going to be grateful for this, but I'm going to force you to be a little bit more specific, because they'll be like, oh, it's digital. How are you, like, what do you mean? Because the whole world could literally be digital. The reason we don't need to go out of our homes is because we can run entire lives digitally. So when you say digital, what do you want people to understand?
What is the millennial interaction within that space? So let's even forget about COVID, because I think it just accelerated what is seen as a habit. And when we did the research, that also came quite strongly in terms of how people looking at and interacting with social media, for example, or influencers, for example, and how's that impacting some of the things that we do when we're talking to this target group.
All right. Well, since I interrupted you earlier, I'll finish and then I'll let others speak. So I definitely don't see a divide between digital and IRL in real life, because whatever you can do digitally, you can do in real life for the most part, when it means like, getting your goals, as long as you're not trying to replace real human interaction with, digital interactions, which I'm sure the world of VR and AR will get us there eventually. But really right now, in terms of just getting stuff done, I'm going to just keep it at that level, getting stuff done, interacting with people, just to pass information or receive information. Almost anything can be done digitally. So I think COVID, yes, accelerated it. For instance, I literally right before this just paid for my groceries to be delivered without having to leave the house. We're all conducting deals now via digital. So I think it's here to stay. I think nobody's going to argue with that. And it is real life. So anyone who tries to make it this sequestered part of life is just wasting time, because it is real life.
Oresia, what's your view?
I think I'll jump in there and just back up what JR is talking about, and mainly focus digital around access, convenience, and visibility, which are some of the pillars that we use at VUCA and what made us start. So with digital, especially within the continent, a lot of the stuff we do is in silos. For example, up until I met you, I didn't know about Asteli. I didn't know about the work that she's doing in Rwanda with Jibu. I didn't know about JR. But just because of our conversation on Zoom and from meeting on a social media platform like LinkedIn, here we are today in this chat. So for me, digital spaces are for access. Their convenience, as JR has said, and visibility is really big, so that through that we can promote some sort of economic activity within the continent.
Yeah, and if I could add, I think it's, if I would drive this towards brands, I think for small businesses, and as I mentioned, it's very important for small business and small African businesses to position themselves digitally. So I think that it's really, so case in point in Rwanda, it's part of generally how we communicate. Our president is on Twitter. Everything that we do, if you need help for electricity, you reach out to the people on Twitter. So it's really, as she said, as everybody has mentioned, convenience, access, and visibility is also extremely important.
Okay, so let's talk a little bit about LinkedIn. How do you use LinkedIn?
I'll go because I mentioned LinkedIn. LinkedIn ranks pretty high in one of my favorite social media platforms, just because of how effective it is as a platform. And as an entrepreneur, and what Asteli has just been talking about, I've been able to make so many connections on LinkedIn. I've been able to do a lot of business on LinkedIn. I've been able to find a lot of stories that we feature on our VUCA magazine from LinkedIn. And LinkedIn is not just, I can't just have my personal profile. So we also have a profile, a company page for our organization. So sometimes if I don't want to be the face of VUCA, I don't want to keep showing my face and talking about everything VUCA, then VUCA has its own page where it can represent itself. And so I love that. I love there's new features coming up all the time. We recently just applied for the ability to go live. And we've been doing shows such as this on VUCA. We've been using YouTube and Zoom, but now we can actually tap into our audience on LinkedIn, which has now grown to like 700, and it's just growing daily, organically, without us really like putting money into ads. So for me, LinkedIn, right up there as a platform. A lot of people my age are a bit scared of the platform. I'm interacting with past partners from Big Four companies, people who previously in non-digital spaces, you'd have to set hectic type of appointments to meet them, or you just wouldn't be able to get a minute of their time. But now with LinkedIn, I can tag you, I can DM you, I can chat to you, and it's up to that person to decide if they would like to interact with me back. So LinkedIn for me, number one.
Is A1.
So LinkedIn, I'm so sorry.
JR, go ahead.
Yeah, actually you go, because I'm going to have a very negative. Are you sure? I'm going to be negative though. I'm going to be negative about LinkedIn. So you probably should say all the positive stuff you want to say.
Yeah, no, I'd say the same thing. I think it's, as LinkedIn has allowed me at least to reach people who I wouldn't imagine being able to reach. And then also for our company, as much as we want, we're talking about the impact that we have on different people in Rwanda and across the continent. It's a platform where it's easier for us to share stories, and then to also attract talent and people who are like-minded as well. So I think that's really great. I know JR is going to say something about the scammers who also try to like somebody reached out to me to to represent them and sell Bitcoin, and I'm like, hello. But yeah, I think there's also that part of LinkedIn, which for a lot of millennials, it's like you don't know how to determine who are the real stakeholders and who are the people who are just trying to waste your time. So JR, over to you.
Yeah, so my thought was not even around scammers. It was the growing anxiety that is interactions on LinkedIn, because everyone is so amazing and awesome all the damn time. And it's not just LinkedIn, it's social media in general, that you're like, yo, you know what? I'm quite happy with my basic life. Must we all be fantastic and awesome all the time? So there's this reality in this digital life, especially the public facing digital life, to be awesome and hyperbolated almost all the time. And so for me, sometimes it's like, you know what, actually, took off certain apps from my phone when I just found myself constantly comparing myself with my peers to find out if I match up or not. Because it's ridiculous. Everyone is running their own race in life, so we don't need to be doing that comparison, but it's very difficult not to do so when you literally have the tools at your fingertips to do it.
So you touch an interesting point, because I think one of the things that came out of the study was that millennials are obsessive, obsessed, and just kind of willing to interact permanently on social media. I don't remember. Maybe JR, you might remember what the outcome of that particular conversation was. Was that a myth? And did we debunk that myth?
So we debunked the myth that people believe social media. We are all aware that we are constantly curating our public images on social media. And so there's no, at least from our research, millennials do not believe what they see on social media. However, it doesn't stop them from wanting to curate their own feeds as well. So it's this dichotomy of, I know it's not real, but I need to take care of it because it is my plot of land on the internet that I need to tend. So it's a catch-22, right? Damned if you do, damned if you do not.
Okay. And just as we're chatting around the idea that what is real and what we can debunk, and like I said, you're my total sample base of 3. So let's do a quick round. Oresia, let's start with you. What is it that people say about millennials that is not real?
Well, I think that is not real. I think there's the same thing. There's a bit of a notion going around that millennials are a bit lazy and they want things fast. They don't have the patience to wait through situations. And I think it's just that, as Tilly was actually touching on earlier, it's around the passion. It's not really about the laziness. So they're willing to work hard and give it their all if it's something they care about. So that should be the question. But when they're in situations where, oh, just work here or just show up, no one's giving you any reasoning behind it, no one is getting any type of buy-in from you, then I think, yeah, it's easy for us to come off as uninterested or disinterested in the particular activity, whatever it is.
Okay, Esteli, what myth do you want to debunk about millennials?
It's. I was going to say exactly the same as I say, but then I'd say that that they're not. A lot of people say that millennials don't really think of the future; they really live in the now. And I think again in social media, this is something that gets people thinking quite a lot. Like, how far am I from the person I want to be tomorrow? I think millennials are very much self-aware and they're very much knowledgeable about what they want. So I don't believe that they, they think that way. So I think that's the myth I debunk.
That's interesting. Do you get that a lot? Like, do you guys get that a lot in the workplace, or, do you get that a lot when you meet with people professionally?
Yeah. Well, I'd say that I do. It's like, oh, why wouldn't you? Like, I'll give my personal example, which is, I could work anywhere, and everybody's like, well, why don't you think of your career and move to somewhere else? And I'm like, well, I want to be in Rwanda, and so people think that I don't think of my future because I choose to stay home and not chase the career that So I'd say, they think that I'm not thinking of the future. Well, I am, probably not in the same way that, the older generation does.
So you raise an interesting point. So let's talk a little bit about that. If we can just segue into this idea of the African dream versus the American dream. What is, JR, maybe I'll start with you. What was your African dream, and where do you see that?
So the African dream is to leave Africa, to escape Africa, to go to Europe or the United States or Canada. In Nigeria's case right now, it seems like Canada is the hot place to be because, Trump doesn't want Nigerians. He made that pretty clear. So a lot of Nigerians are going that direction. It's like, yo, oh Canada, let's sing that anthem. And I think that continues to be the dream, right? As long as you are struggling to find economic access. And I think the reason for it is fair. So I don't remember if it was this group or a different group. I was asking, think about where your parents were when they were your age and what assets they had covered, whether it was land, homes, cars, how many kids they had by the time they were your age. Like there's so much more economic road to cross now compared to when it was our parents' time. And whether it's because, you know, economic access was much better for people who were educated, but now there are so many more educated people, so you're fighting for fewer resources, whatever the reasoning behind it, it then makes sense why people who are like, listen, this country's not going to change my life anytime soon. And I don't want to be looking back 5-10 years from now, unable to, you know, show anything for the work I've put in. So I understand why the African dream is to leave Africa. If we're being honest. Yeah.
What's your dream?
Oh, it's to make my life the envy of my friends who don't live in Africa. Like hands down, like 100%.
Then you better go back on LinkedIn and start posting photos.
I know the envy it's key. They must be envious of the life I have here.
Orisia, why do you choose to set up a business in Africa? I mean, there's probably a whole lot of easier places to be able to live as a young person.
So before I answer that, I just want to touch on something that JR was talking about. It's actually a conversation my partner and I were having last night around we are the first generation that is not going to be able to make more money than our parents. And I believe that that's because we are also the generation that is pushing for ownership. And if we're pushing for ownership, we are the people who are building and we are starting these conversations. So we're doing it for our future generation so that when they come in, some of the opportunities that we had been looking for, some of the doors that we wanted to knock on and open and ask. I know a question I used to ask all the time is, Dad, where were you when people were fighting for freedom and getting into politics and getting these big jobs? And obviously they had their own agenda then. They had their own opportunities for economic growth and their glass ceiling was non-existent almost. So they were MDs and whatever. But now we want ownership. And so back to your question around why I've chosen to be here is because I now want to be that person. I am that person who is fighting for ownership. I'm the one who's fighting to be here, to be known, to start these businesses, to sacrifice these first few years until in the next 10, 20 years, it'd be like, okay, where is VUCA? What did you build when people were building with the digital revolution? What were you doing? This is what I'm doing. And that's why
what do you see as the benefits? As the benefits of entrepreneurship?
The benefit of entrepreneurship, that is a loaded question. Because at the beginning of entrepreneurship, you might not
Are there benefits?
See benefits. It's just pure stress sometimes. But I believe that one of the biggest benefits is independence. Independence in thought, independence in decisions, independence in just my lifestyle. I'm able to pick and choose how much I'm going to show up, how much I'm going to be dedicated, and it's me. So every step that I take and every decision that I make, it's all based on me. And I like that. Some people may not love that, but that for me gives me the confidence to keep pushing. Because then if I fail, it's on me. And if I fly, then I did that.
JR?
So there just won't be enough if those who have it in them to start companies don't do it. So I do think that entrepreneurship on this continent is a calling. I feel that if you have that seed in you, if you have the networks that enable you to do it, if you have the access, whatever you call the things that you need to make entrepreneurship work, and you can create jobs and change lives by creating a company that means something to many people, then you should do it. So in my case, and this is obviously like very driven by a faith-based perspective. Otherwise, I think, frankly, if I did not believe what my faith says about life, I would not give, excuse my French, a shit about what happens on the continent, right? It would be me for me, myself, and all the time. But because of that bigger perspective of the power the transformative power of entrepreneurship in a place, it drives me to want to create a company that, whether it's creating employment for people who are super talented that may not have access to a great job, or creating new information, new knowledge from the African continent in a way that forces, say, people to look at Africa with the respect that it deserves, and not just as the afterthought of the marketing department after they've gone everywhere else. It's like, oh yeah, we should probably open an African department. No. Like the new world is starting now, is starting with us. And I absolutely want to make sure that I am part of creating that new world.
So did you, before you started your entrepreneurship journey, did you work full time?
Yes, I worked a lot. So I worked as a student throughout university. So there I was working on campus. Then I left that. I worked at a youth school prep company teaching engineering as well as SAT prep. Then I joined Black Enterprise magazine when I started my master's in journalism. Worked for Black Enterprise for 2.5 years. And did other journalism things. So like I was working Black Enterprise and doing freelancing. So I was working, there was ones that I actually wrote like 70% of the magazine 1 month, like alone, single-handedly, 70% of that magazine was my writing. And after that, I worked with the Millennial Villages Project. And so working in the NGO space, anyone who's ever worked in it knows that it's a thankless job for the most part, unless you fall in something cushy. But then you're working in far-flung parts of the earth that nobody with your credentials ever wants to be, especially if you're African. You find a lot of foreigners there, but like you're usually the only African at their level who's working there, which has its connotations for a different conversation. And then, yes, I think the time I actually took the most break was when I went in for business school. That's actually when I worked the least, just because I got to do that. But then, yes, I've been working. I don't know when
Asteli, what about you? Would you recommend that? I know we had this initial discussion as well, and you were also looking at entrepreneurship, and there's going to be a time for that. But would you recommend that before you get there, it's good to get into the workplace, get into corporate, get a sense of what it means to work in a business or run a business? Asteli, can you hear me?
I can hear you. Okay. Could you repeat your question, please?
So I was saying that, would you recommend that before you go into business, it's a good idea to actually go and hold down a job, many jobs?
Would I recommend? Sorry, I missed that. Maybe.
Yeah, would you recommend, if you were talking to your younger self, given the experience you currently have, and the experience you've had in both startups as well as agency, would you recommend that it's a good idea to first work before you decide straight out of school, I'm going to become a businesswoman?
Yeah, so if I got the question correctly, I would recommend that working. I think it's very important to work first because. I would recommend that it's important to work first before you get into your master's. I think that was where the question was headed.
Before you get into business.
And no.
Or
maybe you can take that one.
Yeah, okay, I'll go ahead. I worked before I became an entrepreneur, and I believe that it's played a big role in my professionalism. It's played a big role in my discipline and tenacity to get things done. So when you're in a company, there's different structures that you might not find, you most likely will not find when you're an entrepreneur. And some of the things that I've written articles on this, where you are at work and your laptop breaks down, you rush down to IT and ask IT to fix your laptop for you. There's you want to take leave and you need a letter to travel to a certain country. You shoot a quick email to HR and they will put it on the letterhead for you and it will be ready in X amount of time, but super quick. Now, when you're an entrepreneur, you are HR, your operations, your finance, you are every single department.
Your dog's body.
You are the tea lady, everything. And so when you it's important for you to work so that you also know how to segregate your duties within your organization. You're going to start knowing, okay, today I have to take care of payroll. What does payroll look like? And you also get to understand, for example, I also went to business school and that helped me even more other than working, because then you start to know, you just have a lot more structure. You have, remember one night being in the office until midnight, working on a project that I didn't care about. I don't even remember the client. But what I thought to myself then and what I apply in my life now is, if I had the patience to work that long on something I did not care about, then I need to have the same amount of push and drive in my own business. And I need to give that times 10 to see where it's going to go. So yes, you need to work before. And just one quick last point is that we have a colleague who works with us and he doesn't have as much prior experience as the other two people in our company. And you can see the difference in us having to just work alongside him and almost explain some things that we didn't just naturally learn, but we did learn from working previously. So even looking forward, when we have any onboarding that we'll be doing, those are some of the questions we'll ask, because you may not learn the practical work of the job, but you do learn the discipline to just be at a job and segregation of duties. So yes, I absolutely recommend working.
Okay, so that would be the advice you give your preteen self, is first get a job before you decide to jump into entrepreneurship.
Absolutely, yes.
So I want to come back. You guys are all marketing people. So I want to come back to the marketing conversation, and really looking at, how marketing is utilizing influencers to be able to reach communities. And there's quite a lot of talk around that at the moment, people in the passion and attention economy, apparently, and how that's being monetized. So maybe I'll start a little bit with, let's just go back to that research, JR, and I don't know whether you wanted to share with us. Yeah, okay. So there was two things that stood out around the idea that, a lot of us are utilizing influencers in our marketing, and what the research was showing regarding that, and how you guys are, again, in the space that you're in right now. How does this play out for the work that you're doing for your own brands as well as your clients? And maybe Jera's going to just talk us a little bit about what this was saying.
Yeah. So the question here was, who is least believable? Who is least likely to tell you the truth about life? That was the question we asked. And you can see that social media bloggers are liars, according to the respondents. And this was consistent across 3 countries. We did this in Nigeria, in Ghana, and in Kenya. And that's because all of us are social media animals. We all know that we are curating our feeds. We all know that we are, doing what we need to do to get by online. And when you get paid to do it, more so, you do what the brand needs you to do. So in this world but there are aspects of social media bloggers and influencers that are believable, right? So whether or not the brand has done the research to make sure that this social media person is a representative of the core ideas of that brand is a big part of whether or not it's going to be effective. So if you bring a comedian, someone who I go to laugh, if I go there for laughs, and then all of a sudden you're trying to sell me life insurance or a banking product, there's a there's a problem, right? there's a mismatch, a disconnect, right? And I won't believe you. And it doesn't matter how many views you get, you've already shown yourself to not care about what I think. So I'll be there because it'll be funny, but then are you a brand that I want to, you'll get awareness. But I doubt that the only reason you're there is for awareness. You want engagement, you want conversion. So that's one of the things that we noticed. So let's see, what else do we have here? So I'm just gonna go ahead and share all the research. So we do this once and we move on from it. Carol, is that okay?
Yeah, let's do a little bit of it. I'll let you know when I have some questions to ask.
Okay, so you'll see that money is not the biggest driver for millennials across the continent again. Personal growth and development. And that makes sense when you realize that, one, the money is not really as there as you hoped it would be. How much money is gonna get you to the end goal of being able to own something reasonable? So you might as well make sure that you are learning. I saw a question come in about, are millennials just using me for experience until they get to the next thing? Well, uncle, auntie, whoever you are you paying them enough to want them to live the rest of their lives for you? Are you giving them
whose job is that?
Exactly. Are you giving them a reason to stick around? Because I've told you before, Carol, I have people who have worked at Reach who have been offered 2-3 times their salaries and have chosen to stay at Reach. So what is it that Reach is giving them that big salary isn't going to do for them? And that's a question you should be asking yourself. How are you not delivering on that personal growth and development? Because if you are using them as a resource to, chew and spit out, everyone can feel that, right? Everyone knows when they're being used. And so it's a tit for tat. And I think the final slide I want to share, is it here? Okay, I think I've shown you this. Is this personal? Yes. What drives you personal development? Okay, so these are the 2 slides I wanted to, here it is. So we talked about, are millennials all wanting to be entrepreneurs? Well, 60% of them would very much like to be in that space because they've seen that the people who end up succeeding long-term work for themselves. At least that's where they feel they have the most control for their futures. So yeah, those are the things I wanted to share.
So there's a couple of questions around the fact that because 70% of millennials actually want to create their own futures through entrepreneurship, do we just hire them for the short term? And if we know that, do millennials just kind of say, okay, I'm just going to come in there, I'll take what I can because in 2 years' time I'm out? Or like JR, you said on your job, you went and you said, you've got me for 18 months, use me wisely because I'll be out of here in 18 months. Do you find that the workplace is open to those kind of discussions?
I think so. I think that, so depending on where you end up, right? I guess if you are working at a consulting or accounting Big 4 brand name place, I don't know what the etiquette is there. So maybe someone else can answer that question. But if people have routinely come to me and I know full well that they are here for a period, whether they're prepping for business school or for a master's program. And it is my job and my commitment to them to make sure that they are the most admittable to a program. So in the office, we've actually helped people finish applications, prep for the GRE, because we know, it's an acknowledgement of what life is like. I think there are employers who would like to stick their heads in the sand and act like they are your be all and end all. And we know that's not the case. So are you open to that conversation? You can either have it or ignore it, but it's being had without you in the mix. So you might as well acknowledge it. And that's one thing I think that the Big 4 and maybe let me speak more for the consulting firms, they do well because there's an understanding that after 2 years, you're off to your MBA. If you want to stick around, you do so there's that structure and people like to know where they stand with you. So I think that if you can bring that into your conversation because already you've baked in personal growth and development into the conversation, then yes, it's a very different conversation than slave away from me with no sense of direction.
Or Sia, you have a contrary view?
Wow, I was actually just absorbing everything JR was saying and trying to take in his point of view. For personal development and within a company, and if the company knows that you are going to leave, so they're feeling used, I just wanted to take it from a different angle where the companies are companies. They're in leadership positions anyways. They have money. There's income. There's there's revenue being made, but what about the actual workers? So that's where my concern falls into. Are you being told that these are the type of conversations that you can have when you get into your first or second or third job? Because I think there's a disconnect, especially within the continent. And this is coming from me, who's had access, who's been in the diaspora, who's come back, who's been able to experience both worlds. And I think there's a disconnect between when it comes to career choices and what you can do with your career. It's still very, very limited to either the traditional types of career paths, which is, are you going to be a doctor? Are you going to be an accountant? Are you going to be an architect? And then everybody else is kind of left hanging. And just bringing the conversation back about digital spaces and pricing online and selling services or products online, I think there needs to be a lot more education to the end user, which is millennials and younger, the future working generation, and just telling them that, look, you can go and work for a company to gain experience. You can either know that internally for yourself, or you can have a conversation with your employer and ask them, what would my development look like? And if I'm coming in, for example, as an intern, especially if you want to be all-rounded, one of the biggest things that I say, don't stay in a position for 2 years. You can stay and shadow somebody for 6 months and then move to another for 6 months, so that at the end of 2 years, you have 4 pillars of experience. So that wherever you decide to go to, because those first few years of your employment, honestly, if you're not careful, they determine how the rest of your life is going to be. But I don't think that's how it should be. And what is the gap there is the education of the end user. So are we telling our lineage of millennials and the generation below, are we explaining to them how you can use your talents to make money? What does making money and living and working look like in 2021 and beyond? So I think that's on us.
Okay. So Asteli, what about you? Do you
So what I think is that,
yeah, go ahead.
yeah, so what I think is, if I take case in point in Rwanda, is that there's a lot of campaigns around, both for, youth that are still in university, or even millennials, to look into the creative economy and to build their skills within that space. So as far as personal development is concerned, you'll find people that are in my position, but run a blog, and the company where they work at is encouraging them to pursue a career as a YouTuber, or people who are in different, who practice sports and are in athletics, who have a main job, but are also invested in that. And
I think we're all coming to Rwanda, you guys. I think we're just all just
come to Rwanda.
They're just so progressive.
I'm moving to Rwanda, by the way.
I know, this is totally progressive.
So generally, there's a lot more.
No.
There's a lot more, and then also about agriculture. So as much as people are have their regular jobs, there's also a lot of everybody talking about how you can be a young farmer, and seeing how you can develop your skills to be a farmer. So as much as everybody's driven into entrepreneurship, what I see around me is people being told that there's not, entrepreneurship is not only the standard that we are familiar with, but you can grow your skills to do a number of other things as well, and become self-employed and also a career person. So I think that's it.
Oh, fantastic. So since we're talking about entrepreneurship and ideas and that sort of thing, Asteli, do you want to share with us what are some of the big things that you're planning with Jibu or not? You've got a side hustle.
Yes, well, plenty side hustles, but so as I said, we've talked about this before, but something that I'm very passionate about is growing African brands. And I believe I always give an example of how you go to duty free and you can quickly recognize Ray-Bans, you can quickly recognize this perfume, Lancome, and you want to smell like a girl who's in Paris, and you live, in Lagos. So there's a lot of things that I think that I want to contribute to, where to further have a positive connotation with the African way, and help small businesses and brands to really create a big brand feel for their businesses. So this is something that I'm doing on the side, and I'm trying to see how I can also help young people tell the stories, not the standard let's tell our story, but like really tapping into what they are currently doing and what they currently understand, so that they can tell their stories, learn about our history, because after traveling to West Africa and learning about to Ghana particularly, and learning about the Ashanti Kingdom, I was surprised that I know more about Bonaparte one than anything with Queen Nana. So there's a lot of things that I want to do in that space. First, helping African brands create a big brand feel, and then second, getting young people to learn about their country, the history in Africa, and sharing that culture with the world. So yeah,
that's fantastic. And Orisia, what are the big things you're working on?
Well, I need to speak to Astali because there's a bunch of brand work that we're doing, but we've already started that conversation, haven't we? One thing that I'm very passionate about is the African girl, the African woman. And that's what I'm doing through my community, orisia.com, which I just launched in March of this year. And what I'm doing there is just trying to pull out that confidence, that voice. And I feel like in the society, I'm speaking for the entire continent, is that African women are always told to be a little less quiet. What are you saying? Just don't be seen. It's like we're always being pushed down in some way or another. And so my passion there is just to step up and tell people that, you know what, you can still be a good wife and a leader. You can still be a good sister and a leader. You can still be a good mother and a leader. So how do we encompass the whole 360 notion of being an African woman? Who is an African woman? And how do we use our voice to continuously go for our goals? And so the second part of that is, I don't want you to just sit down and say, oh, I have a dream to do A, B, C, D, or I want to do this one day. Now, I want to come in and get us to really say, when you say you want to do something, what are the real steps that you're going to take towards doing that thing? And then the second question around that is, how is it going to be sustainable, obviously, to be able to match your lifestyle? So, for example, I added an extra day during the weekend where I work on this passion that I'm talking about.
Oh, and an extra day. So you got 8 days in a week?
An extra day to my week, taking away from my weekend. Thank you for helping me clarify that. So it's still the same 7 from Jesus. But yes, so it's like, how are you going to find the time when you say you're going to do something? What does that look like? And so that's what I'm really passionate about, and getting people to get out of their comfort zone, to get out of their fear zone, to really step up and be confident and go for their goals and dreams. Thank you.
Nice. JR, I don't think you can top this now.
No, I just think this is just super cool. I think all of y'all are just like pretty cool and amazing. Let's be friends. Please, let's stay friends. Don't ghost me after this. But seriously, don't ghost me. I like Nicole, as I said, Nicole. Carol, you know very much that I don't like to be ghosted, so tell them. But on a more serious note, working on 2 things that I'm super excited about. So on one hand, all of the work we do with people, helping them understand their spending, has led to the development of, from what I can see by scouring the internet, so it must be true, the first ever definitive spending personality test. So we're launching that in July. And I love that it's nowhere else. It's going to be coming out of Africa, not just for Africa, but for the rest of the world. Think of it like the love languages for your spending, or the Myers-Briggs. It's a personality type that actually helps you understand what motivates your spending, why you buy what you buy, and if you're a marketer, why people will buy what you're selling. So I mean, super excited about that. It's been 4 ish months of work creating that test, but like 6 years of digging and diving and building and crafting. But it's so exciting. So the spending personality is going to be coming out soon, July. And then the other thing, I think, Oresa, you mentioned how this passion to help people get to the finish line of the dreams they have. As somebody who used to struggle with finishing my dreams and then figured out that really it's about small things being crossed off a task list. So we just launched vision boards on the Reach app, which has been fantastic. Exactly. So, I mean, it went out on Friday night and I checked. I think we already have about 100 vision boards created in less than a week. So I am so excited for what people are going to be doing as they use this tool. Because I mean, we're already helping you think through your money, your spending goals. How do we bring that in? Because all your dreams are going to involve money at some point. And so helping people start to think through the small steps they need to take to get to that finish goal. That's just been, so those are the two things, right? The spending personality, which is coming in July, but then vision boards that just came out on Friday. So super excited about those two things.
Okay, that's really exciting. So I just have one more question. You know, you guys are going to be the future employers, you know, bringing people into your businesses, training younger people, I hope. Maybe bringing oldies like me to bring some structure and discipline into your startups. So what advice are you giving to people who are younger people? Maybe they're just finishing off at business school, or they want to go to business school, or they want to start something, or even they want to ship out of Africa. If you had to say 3 things that you would say to them, what would those 3 things be in any order?
Wow.
I would tell them, so should I say the 3 things or should I say one and everybody says another one? Okay, so
Go for it.
So first I'd say that write things down. I think one thing that a lot of young people are not very good at is writing things down. Write down your dreams. You know, now Reach has a vision board, use it. So it's very important to write things down because it gives you perspective and it allows you to even go back once you've accomplished your goals or once you've gotten where you want to be able to evaluate. So I'd say that's number 1. Number 2, do not take people for granted. And that's so important. I think another thing is that we're young, you know, something that I envy some of my mentors is that they have very good relationships. And I just, you know, used to ask myself, like, how come I've met a lot of people, but I'm not as tight with them as you are? So one thing that I know now is that it's important not to take people for granted and to also provide value for those people. And then finally, I'd say, you know, be grateful, because I feel like once you're very grateful and, you know, you look at what you have and you know, as much as you want more, you're being grateful will give you more. So I'd say those are the 3 things that
Thank you. That's fantastic advice. I think fantastic advice for everybody, not just young people, to be honest. Who wants to go next?
It appears I was selected by the producer in the back, so I will go next. So I think definitely don't be in a rush to start a company. If I was speaking to my younger self, would I have started Reach when I did? Probably. And thankfully, you know, I did have quite a bit of work experience before starting, but I may have, you know, waited a bit longer or started, you know, maybe 6 months later than I did potentially. Of course, hindsight being 2020, but I would say definitely there is some value in managing your itch as an entrepreneur. Because I think if you are quote unquote a born entrepreneur, that itch will never leave you. You will need to figure it out. Otherwise, you will live a life of quiet desperation. So it will happen. So trust that instinct. But also, it's a balance. Don't be in a rush if that itch is strong. But if you just enjoy talking about entrepreneurship, and you know in your deep heart you are actually made for the corporate world, be you and be an entrepreneur. And you don't need to be like everybody else who's starting a company, because it is a painful, lonely road. And we don't need people who are sad because they've gone down a road that is just rough on the heart. So advice 1 and advice 2 are linked. I would say the third one is, I mean, you probably already figured it out, but like everyone who is older than you is so good for you. You know, like I would not be where I am by a long shot if I did not have, I mean, a mile long line of mentors, big aunties, big uncles, older brothers, older sisters. I just have people who I mean, I don't let them go. You know, like I just don't let them go because life is long and it's short at the same time. And so really stepping, like you don't know who it is that is going to be your champion. And we all need champions. The world is just that kind of place that you don't want to let go of a great champion when you find one.
Awesome.
All right. Well, I should have known that you need to go first so that you get all the good points for everybody. Anyways, my first point is around patience and resilience. I think the two have touched on it as well. But whether it's in your career, at work, or as an entrepreneur, those are two things that you need to hold dear to you. I know that's something that I suffered from a lot just before I hit 30, where I was always just living in the future. I was always just anxious. I always just wanted to be at the end. And I just thought that everything before that was a waste of time and it was taking too long. But now that I'm here and I have the knowledge that I have today, I feel like every single experience that we go through is working towards your goals and your future and your future strengths and your future experiences. So just be patient and be resilient and enjoy those moments. So the second point that I have is also around working hard, which is based on the first point as well. Nothing comes easy. I think with the conversation around millennials is that there's no microwave culture. There's no 15 seconds for everything. Every single thing that you see, by the time Oresia shows up here speaking to you, she's worked so hard. She's gone to Toastmasters. She's gone to schools. She's done her eyebrows. She's whatever, so No. Seriously, nothing comes easy. And I think that once we get rid of that notion and not think that it's hard, but also not think that it's easy, then life is just a bit more bearable. And my final point would be around stick to your roots. Be authentic, stick to your roots. We are African and that is shown in our skin, in our accents, in our body shapes, in the fullness of our lips, our curves, our names, so stick to your roots. Be proud of who you are because you are the representation of your continent wherever you go. So hold that with pride and be a true African. That's it for me.
Shoo, you guys, I can't believe you're talking about I just became 30 and you're speaking like people who have been in this game for many, many years. That's really fantastic. That's really fantastic. I think we have time for a question. JR, does that make you less African because you don't have a proper name?
Did you just call my name improper? Sidebar. We'll handle this
I'm
later.
not sure I understood the question.
Sidebar. Horacia, I saw the shade. I'll handle all y'all. Sidebar.
I'm not sure I understood that last question.
JR, is your name really JR though?
Yeah, it stands for Junior.
Junior.
It really is. So we can. Wow. She hopes. So I've never told anyone the meaning of the full name. And so everyone who meets me in business is always like, so what is your real name? What is your full name? What is your African name? So when I tell them it's Chijidaranam, they're like, can you say that again? So I'm just like, you know what? We're going to stick with JR, and that's what it's going to be. Because I'm not going to have to explain that over and over. So Carol, Horacia, it's an Igbo name. We'll sidebar.
Got it. Thank you. Got it.
Just remember Horacia's advice. Love your name. Love your continent. And show up. But you guys have been fantastic. This was such a great session. I'm just trying to see whether there's any other questions. No, we don't. We've covered all the questions. I really, really appreciate the time. And you're always welcome to the MySoko webinar series anytime. Just reach out. I'm hoping, JR, we will have another millennial research follow-on post-COVID to just kind of share what's happening with young people around the continent. Appreciate the time, the generosity, and thank you all very much. And that's it from MySoko.
Thank you.